This special production of State of the Arts was made possible by the New Jersey State Council on the Arts, encouraging excellence in the arts since 1965. Additional support was provided by the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, supporting cultural, educational, and environmental initiatives that make our world more livable.
I think that what we do here is so crucial to human beings staying human.
It's definitely a community, but since we're all artists, there's definitely a certain amount of time that we all need to just be by ourselves and do our own thing.
It's not an easy thing to be a full-time craft artist, probably the most difficult thing, one of the most difficult things to be in this modern age.
One common thread is a desire to keep the craft movement alive.
Craft is something that is, you could say it's on the endangered list. Fortunately, there's a great thriving movement in most of the media that we have here. And I see wondrous and fantastic imaginations at work.
Fabric artist. It just means I love fabric. I'm sort of a fabric junkie. I like to work with atmosphere and try to get the sense of light or a time of day into the work, into the fabric. I make things that you could either wear or just have in your home. It can be functional or not. It's really important as an artist for me to have this time that's quiet time, alone time, or just time to process your ideas. But you also have to get out and you have to, you're still part of the world, and to bounce ideas off of other artists and just to see how other people work is a really good thing. It's a good balance here because of that. There's so many great artists that come here to teach and share what they know. The students come from all over, and they bring with them everything they know, and every class has such a mixture that you can learn from.
This is a mosaic sculpture of fiddle ferns by Ricky Boscarino, and Ricky is a well-known artist nationally, but particularly in New Jersey because he has such a distinctive, lively, whimsical style. Arts education through our workshops is our real core business. This is by Oak Leaf Pottery, and it is just a beautiful, beautiful pot. The balance is nice, isn't it? Yeah. And the other thing that goes really well with these. But we also have our store and gallery, and in that we give artists an opportunity to sell their work and help them to kind of earn viable livelihoods through their art. Our second floor is a gallery, and we have exhibits, year-round rotating exhibits that give visitors an opportunity to see, you know, a wide variety of techniques and just beautiful, beautiful pieces of artwork. Yes, they can. We have just a very dedicated group of people working here who are not just on the business end of running a craft center, but are actually artists themselves that are resident here, run and manage our studios, but also create their own artwork, which isn't always the case. They'll be often in other centers. People will come in to teach or to manage a studio, but they're not necessarily resident at the place around the year. Peters Valley focuses more on what commonly is referred to as craft versus then perhaps fine art, with a leaning towards contemporary techniques and approaches.
We may be run down looking, but they're great facilities. They're actually world-class facilities. Here in the ceramics department, we have pretty much every kind of kiln within the species of kilns. We don't have a lot of kilns, but we have one of every kind, so we're very versatile that way, and that's kind of key to running I think a good ceramics program, is having the kilns to support that. And the program over the years has been very recognized.
We have here an anagama kiln. It's an amazing kiln. The tradition comes from Japan. It goes up a hillside, and it takes 4 days to heat these kilns and reach temperature and allow them to cool down.
We're dealing with fire. We're dealing with heat, things that melt down and fall apart, and we're dealing with students that tend to be a little volatile themselves. I think certain processes draw certain types of personalities, but we're not like the blacksmiths. Blacksmiths are just, are really kind of full on, the most bravado. You know, there's the most bravado over there. It has something to do with having to be heard above the noise, I think. Jewelers are fussy. Jewelers are fussy. And because can you imagine sitting there and working at this range? Sometimes they have to wear magnifying glasses or whatever to actually approach the surface to what they're doing. So I think that kind of generates a fairly fussy personality.
It's funny, people act like what their craft is. Jewelers are pretty anal retentive, most of them, and pretty arrogant too. We are in crafts, we're like the top of the notch, even though ceramics thinks they are.
The ceramists are, well, I'd have to have somebody else define the ceramists. Weavers, they're probably the most consistent in their personalities. They're real predictable kinds of people, and so it's not surprising with, you know, the rhythm on a shirt or whatever. To do that, you have to just kind of keep this focus.
We always say that the wood people wear plaid shirts and have pocket protectors with pens in them, you know. They're very almost engineer-like in the way they work and the way they dress.
Wood people are at one time they're quiet and reserved and have to be focused because of the potential loss of appendages and putting things together, to really just busting loose. They're kind of, I think of them as being the most repressed, you know. And when they have a party, the woodworkers really cut loose. Of course, this is all so grossly generally speaking.
I was actually a classical musician. That's what I went to college for first. Once I found metal, that was it. I knew that's what I wanted to do. The first time I heat up the metal and heated it up and hit it, and it just moved instantly. I was like, this is what I'm talking about. You know, this is what I want to learn more about. they're all inspired by plants. It's usually stages of plant growth. I like to look at little details of plants, like even under a microscope, and maybe just one little seed and make it huge. Because I think that that's where all the beautiful stuff is in the plant, and you don't get a chance to see it. So I kind of like to make things big, to point out little details that may go unnoticed.
Just keep doing that. Just keep doing that. Good.
Is this nice orange?
That's good. You got it.
Is this a little thin?
The students are really interesting people because they come from so many different backgrounds. So they throw a lot of challenges because there are a lot of varied interests amongst a diverse population of students. And that to me is one of the most interesting things about Peters Valley.
Or can I count on the salt?
No, you can count on the salt for that for
All
sure.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
I've had anything from nurses to lawyers to boiler makers. You know, it's a real variety, especially in blacksmithing, because it's a rare thing and people are curious about it and want to try it.
I make metal sculpture, and at home I make chairs out of street signs. We started off with the fire poker, which involves forge welding, twisting. The forge welding is bonding the metal together. Some more twists and some curls, and that's basically just a fire poker. This is a hood ornament made out of some wrenches and a socket wrench, and I made a letter opener for one of the girls in there that's a lawyer. She opens a lot of letters.
I'm a lawyer. I live in Washington, D.C. I'm a very specialized international regulatory lawyer for a big corporation.
I'm an art teacher. I work in Central New Jersey.
I actually work for a studio that restores historical stained glass windows.
I've been a potter for the past 4 or 5 years. After I retired from New York State Service, I worked for different agencies in the government. And then I became an artist.
I spent 20 years being a mom. I have 3 boys, but they're all grown now, so I have a lot more time.
I'm a test engineer for a fiber optics company.
日本から来ました。大学では陶芸を専攻しています。はい。
Is truly a mix. It's a mix of experience and it's a mix of ages. We even have people in their early 80s that come here to take classes. We're really concerned, however, about providing young people and young emerging artists with opportunities.
For many, it'll be one of the greatest experiences of their lives. And it's great to hear back from them all the time, because we do become very close very quickly.
They may not be experts, they may not think that they're of themselves as artists, but their interest level is already there. And while it's a lot of fun, there are people that are here for serious reasons. I mean, they're very serious about what they're doing. And then other folks are just here because, rather than sitting on a beach for a week, they like to go and learn something new.
Yup. Festering? Well, it's anything that Jen gives me usually just goes in there to fester. I ignore it. I think that coming and taking a workshop at Peters Valley, pick your medium. I think it's like almost a necessity, and increasingly so in our regular daily lives. We're just like running to try and keep up with the technology. Could have come around if you've been around this weekend. We're having nudes in the lane.
Peters Valley is unique in that it's in a protected area, in the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area.
Such a tranquil, pretty, organic place. So that's a starting point, which just creates an atmosphere that's so conducive to learning and relaxation and creativity.
There are a number of craft schools that grew up in the 40s and 50s, which is uniquely American. It's a uniquely American concept, this idea of the craft school. One of the things that I think probably marks the American cultural life came to blossom in the 20th century. And that was that notion of extra time and that notion of not necessarily leisure time, but that notion of having some extra time at the end of a week or during a summer, that idea of the summer vacation. That's the good part. And along with that came opportunities to get away from normal, everyday humdrum of life and to do something with one's hands and with one's creative impulses. And also be part of a group. It has a lot to do with being part of a group. I think that that's probably what gave rise to the advent of craft centers like Peters Valley and others that are sprinkled around the country, because you don't see that so much in other countries.
It was at a time when a lot of people were seeing the disappearance of crafts, and they wanted to see them preserved in the traditional sense, and also to teach not only the traditional crafts, but to teach more modern expressions of those crafts, to interest people in learning them, and to make sure that they didn't disappear. Several of the crafts were in danger of disappearing over time simply because of mass manufacture. Peters Valley was named for Peter Van Nest, who settled there in the late 1700s. According to our research, this is probably the house that Peter Van Nest built in the 1790s for his own use. And it was a typical Dutch frontier house. The first job that I know that he had was as surveyor of highways for Sandyston Township. He was either one of the first or the first. I enjoy the fact that I'm using Peter's house. It's enjoyable working in there because the atmosphere is conducive to the work. In 1962, the Corps of Engineers proposed the Tox Island project to Congress and got it authorized at that time for flood control. The thing is that the cost of the project outweighed the benefits, and the benefits were dubious, and they never took into consideration the bad aspects of the dam.
There were people who were moved out of these homes. Some sold their homes and so forth and relocated elsewhere.
There's one headstone in the cemetery that says, "Let me see the Park Service move me out of here." To this day, there's a misunderstanding that Peters Valley was a cause of people being removed from their houses. In fact, Peters Valley was an idea that kind of progressed. The National Park Service superintendent that was assigned here was interested in the arts, was interested in history, and he thought it was a shame that this village should go to waste. And the Park Service did have a thought, and their first thought was to try a craft fair and see what would happen. It was so overwhelmingly popular, they incorporated the Craft Education Center in 1970. The people that came into the Craft Education Center, they were not the reason people were removed from their houses.
So the legacy goes on and on. And there are some very difficult and complicated feelings around that issue. We have tried to be good stewards of the place. We could do a lot more.
Every once in a while, you'll just have to check this and see how far up it's going to come and how thin it is, right?
Okay.
This is the jewelry fine metal department. We do silversmithing, goldsmithing, all types of metal work that isn't blacksmithing. Everything in the jewelry trade is what we do here. I was just kind of flailing around, and I took a jewelry class, and the tools, such a cliche, but the tools felt perfect. As soon as I felt them, it felt like, whew, it was amazing. They felt like they just belonged in my hands. Well, I'm going to show you cuttlefish bone casting. You take the skeleton of a squid-like fish, a cuttlefish, cut it in half, sand it down a little bit, make an impression in it, and tape two halves together. This will just hold the two parts of the mold together. And we're ready to cast. Pour molten metal in it, and because it's a high calcium content, you're able to pour molten metal right into it. And then open it up and we'll have a pendant, or let's say the beginnings of a pendant, because then you get another half hour of making it into something. A large portion of what we make our money on is craft shows.
At the first craft fair, I think the Park Service thought there might be a couple thousand, or they might thought there might be 1,000 people come, and there were several thousand. They were astounded that so many people came. They just couldn't believe it. From then on, it just took off. From then on, it took off. People liked the atmosphere, the ruralness of it, and it just took off after that.
The craft fair has gone from a tiny little operation in one of the fields nearby, with the staff cooking the food for the public to buy and just a small number of craftspeople, to a really large professional crafts fair that features about 160 artists from around the United States. Hopefully there'll be lots of folks that like to buy things and do their Christmas shopping then, and it's just a lovely weekend.
The craft fair is really, it's more than just a place to buy a trinket. There's something that's very important for us in putting that on and providing that as a vehicle of support.
I think that crafts fairs as such are often the mainstay of a craft artist's life. They need to find an audience to buy their work if they're going to live off of being a craft artist. So the crafts fair is integrally locked into our program and what we do.
I view the craft fair as that time of year where the focus shifts from being one of being process-oriented. Here in the workshops, it really is about process. The focus is really about process. Students coming in and watching how other artists, and in many cases master artists, tackle the problem of expressing something in a pot or expressing something in a sculpture and how that's done technically. The craft fair at the end of the year, the focus shifts to being something about the product. What I mean is the public is exposed to a large group of people who, behind the booth, the closed doors of the booth, are out there most time of the year making the work, and dealing with those technical issues that go into producing it and all those things that generate a work, a craft. It's the equivalent of sitting out by a nice, quiet, babbling brook, and all of a sudden somebody opens the floodgates, and you're in the middle of the brook. That's how it changes. It goes from something very peaceful and meditative and so forth to a torrent.
I guess computers can do a lot of tricks, and you can simulate a lot of things that you can do with more traditional photography methods. But if you don't understand those traditional photography methods, if we don't help preserve the craft of photography, there'll be something major lost.
We're going to have robots making stuff. It just takes a lot of humanity out of everything if you don't have something handmade, and unusual. Not like everybody else's.
Can you mass manufacture horseshoes? Certainly. Are handmade ones necessarily any better? No, but there's a skill, and it's important to maintain that skill. It's sad when society gets to the point that they can't do what their ancestors back in the Stone Age did. There's the satisfaction of the artisan of making something with their own hands, their own creativity, versus a machine making it. Can a machine make it? Sure. Can it make everything that's made in a craft environment? No.
There are so many thousands, almost millions of people that need crafts. That's the importance of crafts. They need them. And we simply cannot do without them. And that's the importance of them.
Why is it that we still find the need to make it by hand? Well, it's because we need to use our hands. And I think that's a key element about being human. And I think that we need that. We need to have that, and we need to preserve that. And that's one reason why, you know, for me, this place makes so much sense, because we have history that needs to be preserved here, and we have traditions of crafts that need to be preserved. And so a lot of what we are about here is preserving these things and keeping them alive and keeping them vital for future generations.
This special production of State of the Arts was made possible by the New Jersey State Council on the Arts, encouraging excellence in the arts since 1965. Additional support was provided by the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, supporting cultural, educational, and environmental initiatives that make our world more livable.